All right. Hello, everyone who's tuning in for our Teen Dating Violence Awareness Month discussion. Today, we have a few people here who have some great contributions and information about their work with teenagers. So to start, my name is Lindy Keefe. I'm YWCA York's prevention educator. I work primarily with preschool through college age students in elementary schools, middle schools, childcare settings, high schools, and college. And I work typically to build the skills that have been proven to prevent violence in our community. So I'm going to throw it over to my colleague, Dr. Sara Walters.
I'm Dr. Sara Walters. I am the community outreach advocate at YWCA York. So I do a lot of prevention work with Lindy, but my primary focuses are high school and college age. We do advocacy at the local college as well to let folks take advantage of us as a confidential resource. I'm also the author of a young adult novel called The Violent Season, which explores toxic relationships between young people. So all of these topics are super close to my heart and a part of the work that Lindy and I do every day.
And Klarissa is visiting with us to take part in this discussion from Valley Youth House. So she's going to introduce what Valley Youth House is and then her role within the organization.
Hi, everybody. I am Klarissa Hargan. I work with Valley Youth House. Valley Youth House does more than just provide a home for Pennsylvania's vulnerable, abused, and homeless youth. We partner with thousands of individuals each year to build a solid foundation for young people and their families. With dedicated street outreach, housing, counseling, skills training, health, prevention, and intervention services, we empower resilient young people in establishing promising futures. So there is Valley Youth House. And my specific role at Valley Youth House is the school-based life skills program coordinator, so SELS coordinator for short. I go into the local schools in York County and I teach with my team. We teach a 15-week course about life skills for students that have been identified at risk or have identified themselves as needing our services, needing assistance. We're also able to refer out to other programs and help parents as well through case management.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Klarissa. Sara and I have had the fortune to be able to partner with Valley Youth House for as long as we've been working for YWCA York. We work not only with Valley Youth House with their in-house classes, but we also work with Klarissa and her school-based life skills classes. So we're currently visiting with, I think, around 5 different high schools in the county. So we are going to be speaking from our experience working with teenagers in high school and middle schools. Sara and I can also speak to working with young adults at the college level. We've also had past and previous employment experiences with young people at different levels. So I myself was a camp director. We come from all different walks of life, but we are focusing our talk today on helping to elevate the safety of our community for teens. February is Teen Dating Violence Awareness Month. Every February, it is a recognized awareness month that is not only there to build awareness around this issue, but also to help prevent it. It's recognized by Congress since 2010. So we celebrate this awareness month by trying to bring as much insight into this topic, not only to the teens in our community, but to the adults around them to help elevate the safety for those teens. So we know statistically that about 1 in 3 teenagers will experience some form of dating violence before they're 18. We also know statistically that those teens who experience that, only about 30 to 35% of them will actually ever tell anyone. And a lot of that is because of this stigma and the shame surrounding dating violence. And it's also that adults aren't always seen as a safe place because adults a lot of times may not know how to have those conversations. So we want to equip you today with some insight, some warning signs of unhealthy or abusive relationships, and some conversation starters and tips. So as my first question to Sara and Klarissa, what do you see as one of the most important issues facing teens today in their relationships? And I'm going to throw it first to Dr. Sara Walters.
Yeah, thank you. So just from my work here at the YW and the interactions that myself and Lindy have had with young people, including the advocacy hours we provide for college age students, I am noticing that there is a lack of understanding of how to get help but also the different kinds of help that is available to young folks who might be going through something. And the thing that I'm noticing cropping up a lot in terms of those issues they might be looking for help with, it's things like stalking, harassment, especially in online spaces. As we've been increasingly digital in the last handful of years and kind of granting more and more access to ourselves in virtual spaces, I think young people are lacking a lot of the tools they need to navigate that and set those boundaries in those spaces that may not be physical. So finding ways to protect themselves in their relationships in digital spaces. So that includes like understanding consent when it comes to sending and receiving materials and photos and things like that, what information they're sharing with people, what kind of access their friends and partners might have to them and their private information. These are things that I'm noticing like being talked about a lot more, but also being asked about when folks are coming to us for help.
Yeah, thank you so much. And Klarissa, you work with young people across the county. What are you seeing as one of the issues that they face in the relationships in their lives?
I mean, I think all teens are learning how to be in a relationship. So if the relationships that they have around them that they've seen at home aren't necessarily what they I don't want to say it class as a healthy relationship, they might not be able to pick out those key topics for their own discussions with their partners. So they're all learning and not necessarily having the best sources to pull from. So either resources of knowing who to go to for help, where to seek peer support as well. We have all of these resources online. Just like Sara said, we have just limitless access to other people, but sometimes that can feel so isolating as well, because you don't know where to go. Because again, they're learning how to be in a relationship with their friends, family, romantic partners, everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. So Sara and I teach healthy relationships a lot with young people. And if folks are curious, there is a whole list of characteristics, qualities, green flags of healthy relationships, but ultimately the two that are most important are respect and equality. And Klarissa touched on one of the pieces that we talk about a lot with adults who work with teens, whether they're parents, caregivers, teachers, counselors, is the idea of modeling. So if a teenager has healthy relationships modeled around them, whether they're family, friends, or romantic, they have more source material to pull from. So I think that's a great point. So building on that, how can adults support in recognizing what healthy relationships look like what works and what doesn't? How have you been able to see that awareness be built in young people? I'm going to throw it first to Klarissa.
I think open discussions are really important. Being able to build that trust with your parent, so that way you feel as the parent or guardians or other adult individuals in your life, building that trust and that mutual respect there, and then being able to connect it and open up that communication about romantic partners, because that's the basis that we have to go off of. And then going through and having those open discussions, utilizing resources that you've found. So examples that you've seen in media, just open discussions. It doesn't have to be a big to do. It doesn't have to be a huge, well, we're going to have this whole laid out conversation about every single topic that you ever had any questions about, or I ever had questions about when I was your age. Like ongoing discussions, checking in. It doesn't have to be, a one and done conversation. It really shouldn't be.
Thank you so much. Sara?
Yeah, I have to echo so many of those points, because the thing that Lindy and I have just recently spoken about with some of the trainings we've done with folks who work with teens and young people is the idea that it is not one conversation, but many, which Klarissa mentioned. It's this ongoing discussion. And I think that what they can do is just fostering that safe space in whatever way they can, so that the young people in their lives feel empowered to turn to them as a source of information, as a source of understanding, of non-judgment. So having this space that's fostered where they might feel safe to turn if something does happen and they really do need help, or if they have a question. So just having those, keeping that door open, so to speak, in a really productive way.
Yeah. So Sarah and I have developed a training, if anyone is interested who's watching, on how to have difficult conversations with children, and a training on how to have difficult conversations with teens. And a lot of what Klarissa and Sarah just mentioned are pieces of that training. So not the talk, but many. And ultimately not having to have all the answers, because we find that that's a barrier with many adults is, I don't know everything about this topic, so I shouldn't even try to have the conversation. But having it and fumbling through that conversation is better than avoiding it, because ultimately we build shame and we build resistance when there are topics that we're afraid to talk about with the young people in our lives. So Sarah, as a victim advocate, can you help list, obviously you work in the field of domestic violence and of sexual violence. Can you help list some of the general warning signs, particularly, popular ones, I shouldn't say popular, but like ones that we find more with young people? So what are some warning signs that parents, caregivers, teachers can look for in the relationships they're seeing with young people?
Yeah, especially for the adults who might be kind of on the outside of a relationship like that and seeing things that are manifesting outwardly. I would say things like isolation. If you're noticing that somebody, a young person who's in a relationship, is kind of being pulled away from their support system. So they have a partner or a friend or whatever relationship dynamic it might be that's kind of consuming all of their time by cutting them away from their family and friends. That's not a great sign. It kind of takes away their power in a way, but also takes away their opportunity to ask for help if they need it. The other really big one that might be more outwardly apparent is obviously any kind of physical violence. If there is verbal altercations happening in front of other people, that is a pretty big indicator that worse things might be happening in private. So any kind of outward manipulation, negative talk, verbal abuse. But even down to noticing if that person is invading someone else's privacy. So whether it's an intimate relationship, a friend relationship, or a stranger, the idea of someone else's privacy being invaded, or things like phone passwords being demanded, needing to know who they're talking to and what they're talking about all the time, or in maybe a stranger relationship or an acquaintance relationship, following them really closely on social media in an uncomfortable way. Maybe even physically in the halls of a school, being in their space in a way that makes them uncomfortable. So those like observable behaviors that like we as adults might be able to kind of notice, there maybe are a little less than what we might think of when we think of abusive or unhealthy relationships, which is physical violence, altercations, verbal abuse. There's a lot of different layers that might not be apparent that we can kind of take notice of and check in.
Yeah, when Sarah and I do healthy relationships trainings, ultimately, unhealthy and abusive relationships boil down to power and control. So if you ask yourself, does it seem like the young person in my life feels controlled by someone else? Are their actions or their words controlled in some sense by someone else? Those are questions that you can sort of boil those things down. Everything Sarah listed falls into someone trying to have power over someone else or someone trying to control someone else. Klarissa, is there anything that with the teens throughout the county that you've been working with, anything that you notice in particular from your interactions? A lot of yours are like school-based interactions too. Is there anything that you're seeing?
I actually see a bit of peers and friends. They'll be like, "Hey, something's going on with her or him or whoever." They'll point it out, and sometimes there's also the feeling of the person in that relationship where I should just give them a second chance. I should give them another chance. I should give them a third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh chance. And I think those are the ones where we're like, we'll just don't. But teens haven't developed that ability to say no as solidly as adults do, and not saying that all adults say no as well as they can. So that those skills that are still developing, having that peer support group, having the ability to put in those specific hard boundaries, it's a learned skill, and it's a learning process to get through there. So those are the things I've noticed in local communities.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, is that other teenagers are aware, and they're seeing things, but they don't always know where to go, and they don't always know what to suggest. Sarah and I talk a lot with adults about having hypothetical conversations. So allowing the teen in your life or the young person in your life to play around with their options in a hypothetical discussion, so that when something occurs in their life, they've practiced it a bit. You know, what would you do if like your friend's boyfriend said this? Or what would you do if someone you were dating did this? Sort of playing around with some of those what ifs can help practice setting boundaries. A lot of what Sarah and I find are statements of discomfort around setting boundaries, around saying no, and around being polite. And I think that idea of, well, I'll allow someone another chance, or I wasn't sure what to say, so I just ignored the issue altogether. Those are ways where those are chances we can help those young people practice those boundaries in their life, because there's nothing wrong with saying no. There's nothing wrong with not being free on a certain night. There's nothing wrong with not wanting to date someone, even if they're really a nice person. They just might not be the right fit for you. So I think that's a lot of the conversations that we end up having in high schools too. How can an adult start conversations? Most of the adults we talk about are like, this is awkward. I don't know what to say to my daughter or my son. I don't know what to do when it comes to even opening this door, as Sarah phrased it before. So any tips at all about how to even open this door with the young people in our lives appropriately? Obviously, we're speaking a lot to parents, caregivers, counselors, teachers, but you may be close to a young person in your life through, they might be your niece or your nephew or your grandson. So how do we sort of open these conversations? Sarah, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I mean, something that I tend to go to, and I recently had this discussion with my older brother, is the parent of a 12-year-old, my nephew, who is now in middle school. And so a lot of new things are coming up, a lot of new conversations. He's hearing a lot and learning a lot from his friends and peers at school. And we know that fellow middle schoolers probably aren't the best source of information that is reliable and accurate. So letting them share, what my brother has noticed is just like letting them share what they've learned, what they're hearing, and then asking them questions about that, as opposed to kind of just diving in with asking about them and their lives in particular, like kind of skirting and finding ways in around that. And one way that I often recommend to folks is by using like popular media. Like we all watch movies, especially, maybe we watch them together. Maybe we watched a show or an episode of something or a movie, or maybe even we read a book, and using the things present in that book or that show or that movie to ask questions like, I just thought, did you see that? Did you see when that happened? What do you think about that? So something, just using that example, because we know, Lindy and I know, when we go into high schools and we talk to these kiddos, I guess they're not really kiddos in high school, but when we talk to them, they love to talk about that stuff. We often ask them, like, what's your favorite movie you watched recently? And they want to talk about it. So using that as like an opportunity to bring up that subject matter, if it's there and already being modeled and discussed in a way, it might feel a little more welcoming, because it's not about them. It's not about like asking them directly, like what's happening in their lives, which might make them shy away a little bit.
Yeah, Klarissa, any other thoughts in terms of like opening that door to conversation?
I think before you enter into that kind of conversation, you assess what do you want out of that? What is your end goal? And how direct, transparent do you want to be about what your end goal is? And there's also making sure that, like, Sarah mentioned, not making it about the kid specifically, but there's also the idea that you leave it open conversation, open questions. We always get told that, leave open-ended questions. That's what you want to do. You don't want to be like yes or no. And I think also aiming for a yes or no question that sometimes can lead, or yes or no answer can sometimes lead us into a more accusatory question. And that can make anybody shut down when you feel like you're being accused of something. So in our programming for SBLS, we teach about I statements. So you say, I feel this, I feel an emotion, when this happens because I have this prior experience with it. So utilizing different principles through that to really connect with the youth.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. And part of the training that Sara and I gave recently on having these conversations, the other piece is, when we open this conversation, when we would determine like, what is our end goal? Your end goal might just be to start the conversation about relationships and make it so that they can turn to you. You can always come to me if you're not sure about something. I might not know the answer, but we can find it together. Is also correcting misinformation. You can be that source. If you do know that something they're saying is wrong, you can gently correct that and say, that's funny. I kind of thought that too, or I wasn't sure, but actually it's this. Gently correcting while allowing them to start to create their own beliefs. So ultimately, with all of this information, people often want more information. They want to know where to turn, and we want folks to know as well. So we always have our hotline at YWCA. We have a 1-800 number, 1-800-262-8444. We also have our website. We also, Sara and I recommend loveisrespect.org. It is a website built with information for high schoolers and college students, specifically around healthy relationships. It is our greatest source of information. It is factual, it's interesting, and it's formulated with high schoolers and college students in mind. They also have a 24-hour confidential text line and chat line, because we know our hotline is staffed by incredible people, but we know that sometimes teenagers may not want to speak on the phone. We also want to make sure that folks out there know that we do have brochures in both English and Spanish that are made for parents and caregivers, specifically with some information about healthy relationships when it comes to teens. So identifying warning signs and where to get help. Klarissa, if someone was interested in learning more about, Valley Youth House or some of like the school-based life skills classes, anything like that, is there somewhere they could go for that information?
We have our valuehouse.org website as well. That would give information about our office locations. Our office in York can also give more information about what services we have available in the area as well. Our phone number is 717-793-30. Yep.
That's okay. I literally had to
Yeah.
look, I had to double check with the hotline. No worries. People can look it up at valuehouse.org. Yes.
Yes.
And it's a great website and a great resource. So they have classes if you have teens in your lives who are looking to sort of learn some different skills. And if they qualify, they're great sources. We partner with them. Again, we have these brochures available. The last piece of information we'll leave you with is we do have our prevention programming. So as a prevention educator, I not only go into classes and teach those skills at all age levels, we also offer trainings for counselors, teachers, parents, and caregivers. We have a lot of different things that are helpful for people to really be the expert in their child and teens' lives. So we're just there to pass on information and help to elevate the collective safety of our community. We want it to be a safe place for teenagers. The very last thing is that tomorrow night, so Thursday, February 24th, we will be hosting, Sara and I will be hosting a short documentary screening. It's a short documentary. It's approximately 25 to 30 minutes long about one family's experience with teen dating violence. We'll be hosting about a 20 to 30 minute discussion virtually afterwards. So anyone's able to register. We'll include in the caption for this, we'll include the link as well. It is free to register. It'll be about an hour-long event, but it has some really great information and one personal experience with teen dating violence. Are there any final messages or anything else that either of you would like to pass along? Well, thank you so much to Klarissa from Valley Youth House. Thank you so much for Dr. Sara Walters from YWCA York. We appreciate everyone's time who tuned in, and we want to thank you so much.